Okay. So, why don't you introduce yourself?
Talking to you or talking to the camera?
Either way, whatever you want to do.
Okay, I'll talk to you then. So,
Okay.
So as you know, I'm David McCoy. I'm the director for the Academic Success Center. Been here for just about a year now. It's been a good year. Seen a lot of growth in the Academic Success Center. And so the Academic Success Center, do you want like a brief explanation of that?
Yeah, so what it is.
Yeah, sure. So the team is composed of myself, our new coordinator, Allison Stella, and then our administrative assistant, Aaron Wolf. Between the three of us, we try to coordinate a number of things. Probably the primary thing that we're known for on campus is providing group study facilitation. So with group study facilitation, 3 to 6 people from a class will come up and they'll say, hey, we're interested in getting group tutoring. They'll give us a list of times and days that they can meet, and then we'll try to find a tutor from our list. We have probably about 60 to 75 active tutors and study group facilitators at any point in time, and they'll begin meeting with them most of the time on like a weekly basis for an hour to 2 hours each session, all of which is free and covered by the tuition cost. And once we set that up, they meet and they go from there. So study group facilitation is the main thing. We certainly do one-on-one tutoring as well. It's much more limited. We often do it in conjunction with other services, but we recognize that some students are going to learn best in that setting and maybe just need that setting. The other thing we really do a lot of is our supplemental instruction program. So right now we support around 20 courses, or 20 sections of some different courses between math and science with supplemental instruction, where a student who's been successful in the course sits in that class again as a teaching assistant of sorts, and then holds study group sessions outside of the classroom. So similar to a study group facilitator, but a little bit more intimately involved with the course, helping with the class itself. And then we do a lot of academic coaching and just a number of kind of individual students come in looking for help. We build modules around note-taking, things of that nature. We're starting to explore expansion into virtual tutoring to reach students remotely, and just exploring some other possibilities of workshops and things like that too.
That is an amazing summary. Wow, you're a good communicator.
Oh, thanks.
Anyway, okay, so when the students come in for tutoring, they'll get a form usually from Aaron, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they take the form and they go and they get it filled out, and they get other people. Now, does one student fill out one form and then everyone else fills out individually? They fill out forms individually, even though they want to be in a group?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the way it works?
Yeah, I understand the question. So we have these study group request forms, these are brand new. They recently got updated. They're basically just aesthetic updates, mm-hmm. but they might just look a little unfamiliar to people if they are used to what's been there. But any member of the group can complete one of these, whether it's physically here or on our website. On the Westminster Academic Success Center's website, there's a link to a group study form that looks fairly similar to this. It asks for the same information. And so one student can fill out the paperwork entirely if they have all the information. And so the bulk of it would be, there's one person's information here, which is typically kind of the group leader. So they provide their name, their email, their phone number, the course information, and the instructor name. Typically where one student can't quite fill it out all the way is here though, when it asks for each additional group member's name and their email. Typically they might not know exactly how to spell someone's name or what someone's email is. And so oftentimes they might just touch base with their group and just say, hey, can each person complete this? Or if they don't have a group, they might go to their class and make an announcement, or have their instructor make an announcement. And so then, whether it's that student or any student, just comes back in and drops this off, complete with what days and times work best for the group, and that's all they have to do. So it's not, every person doesn't necessarily have to turn something in. It's just one document, whether it's electronic or physical, submitted to the Academic Success Center, and they could turn that in here, they could turn into Aaron at our front desk up there, they could turn into Allison over in the office, just on the other side of the desk. Any of those will get it to the right place and we'll get things rolling. We typically process these within a couple days, depending on the course. Every now and then we'll get a course where we just don't have somebody really quickly, or we might have only one tutor, and so then there might be a little bit of back and forth between connecting the group with the time that works to a tutor who has the availability, but typically you can get them processed within a couple days.
That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So what about if a student wants one-on-one tutoring? How, is there a form that they fill out, a request form, or how do they qualify for that, or what?
Yeah, so one of the things we tried to do going from last year to this year is to streamline some of our paperwork and some of our processes. There used to be a green form, which I think a lot of people are familiar with if they've requested one-on-one, called a course assistance request form. A green form, it asks you for any number of things, like things you've tried, you had to get your instructor's signature, things of that nature. This year, what we actually did was we're actually just using the same form. It's, in a number of ways, the school tried to transition away from one-on-one being emphasized and push it more towards study group. And what we were finding is that students would often just come back with the group study request form that we were just talking about, and they would just have one name on it. And they'd say, well, I couldn't find a group. Or for some reason they would just have their own name on it, and they wouldn't have taken a one-on-one. And so instead of making them take the green sheet, go back, get the instructor signature and all these things, we just decided, you know what, we'll just process the group paperwork as it is. We always inform the instructors via blind carbon copy about the students getting assistance anyways. And so they're in the loop no matter what, whether they're getting signatures or otherwise. And so there's a little bullet here. There's a little bullet here at the bottom that says meeting with an ASC director or coordinator is required to determine availability of individual tutoring. And so if a student really does want individual tutoring, we do want to speak with that student, because there's just not enough research to support one-on-one tutoring as a sole means of support for a student to be successful. And so we want to communicate with that student. What other steps are they taking to be successful? We might even incorporate as part of their tutoring kind of contract with the Academic Success Center that they have to spend an hour a week in the Math Center, or they need to set up at least one meeting for the semester with their instructor. That's pretty common with some of the design classes. We'll do something like that. But so they fill out that same form. They drop it off just as they would any other time. We try to set up an appointment if we have an opportunity to. Like sometimes we'll talk to the student there on the spot, or we would have already spoken to the student or something like that. They'll drop it off, we'll process it just like always, and we'll move from there.
That's pretty interesting. So I wanted to go back to the supplemental instruction. Did you explain, the supplemental instruction, I think you explained it, but I can't remember for sure, that it's a student that's taken the class before, that's sitting in the class now, that has study skills or study sessions. Okay.
Yeah, I touched on it really briefly, so I can certainly elaborate.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so the supplemental instruction program is somewhat still new. Last semester was the first semester where we formally incorporated it into the school's kind of programming for student support. It's based out of a model from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. It was developed in the 70s. It's continued to have renewed research that shows that it's very successful, and so we wanted to incorporate it in some of our gateway classes. Gateway classes meaning classes that are typically required of a degree or a student's goal that oftentimes get in the way. So in this case, we focused on Math 120, which is Math for Liberal Arts, Math 121, which is College Algebra, and Math 135, which is Statistics. Almost every single person's degrees or degrees that they're seeking require credit for at least one of those classes. And so those having extremely high failure rates, or DFW rates, D's, F's, or withdraws, led to the creation of the SI program being implemented in them. So yes, we're taking a student who's previously been successful in that course or higher, and we're re-embedding them back into the course. Now they're not paying for the class and they're not getting a grade for the course, they're actually getting paid to be in that class. And they're working alongside the instructor or the faculty member during the class, not as a lecturer, but more as a second set of eyes and a second set of hands to go around the room. And so particularly in a lot of classes that have active learning, you have these different groups around you have these pods and you have groups and you have different people at different tables. And so the SI leader will actually, much as the instructor would, walk around and check things out. The SI leader is going to do the same thing. So that's in class. And outside of class, they're a resource for the students. So they'll schedule these study groups outside of class, typically 2 to 3 per week. And they'll be semi-structured in that oftentimes these SI leaders are communicating with the instructor on asking them, what should we be covering? What are the big things coming up? What are you going to emphasize on the test that we can make sure we cover? And so they're going to be covering some of those topics in the SI session, probably 30 to 45 minutes, but also reacting to the students. If they don't need help on a particular subject, they might not cover that subject. But then there's also going to be a little bit of homework help in there as well. It's meant to be not only homework help, it's meant to be a deeper conceptual understanding of the material as well as building those connections. It's amazing how many students come to community college, and because we don't have residence halls and we don't have a sports team or anything like that, it's hard to feel like you belong. Some people drive in, they go straight to class, they go to their car and they leave. And so that's certainly another goal of the supplemental instruction program, is to build community between members who might not feel like they have one. And so it's community building, it's homework help, deeper understanding of the material. And then we do a number of things with the supplemental instruction leaders themselves. We have an extensive training with them at the beginning of the semester. We meet with them every couple weeks for team meetings. We work with them to do test reviews and things of that nature. So it's a really in-depth program that was very successful last semester in its first iteration, and we're hoping that it's the same this semester as we look to expand into a few more of the science areas and continue to grow from there.
That's pretty interesting. So when a tutor, a supplemental instruction leader comes or has those sessions, do they fill out forms that track who attends the class, the sessions, and who doesn't?
Yeah. So I'm going to present both kind of the tutor side and the supplemental instruction leader side, just so the differences are clear. If a group is established for tutoring, our study group facilitators, our tutors, whichever you want to call them, they have blank sign-in sheets. Oftentimes it's only 2 or 3 people in a group, so it's not that hard for students just to sign their name and the time in, the time out. With the supplemental instruction leaders though, because potentially the whole class could be there, we didn't want them to necessarily have these sign-in sheets where people are having to write their name every time and the time in and time out. It's a lot of paper, it's a lot of writing. Students might just sneak in and not write their name in just because they show up a few minutes late and they just don't think to do it. And so to help manage some of that data a little bit with the SI program, we actually have pre-printed rosters for our SI leaders. So we fill in the class roster for them on a document that we have, and then as students come in, they just initial next to their name under the date associated with it. So if you can imagine kind of an Excel file, it's a column of names, a list, and then a row of dates, and then they're just initialing in the same row as their name under the date.
I see.
Yeah, and so that's how they do that. They keep track of that themselves, and they turn that document every 2 weeks in with their payroll. That's the way we ultimately decided to do it with them. I think in a perfect world, we would have an electronic system where they could sign in electronically, wouldn't have to worry about data transfer, wouldn't have to worry about them keeping up with documents. But part of the struggle that we have with the Academic Success Center is we don't have a centralized entry point or exit or a space where all these things happen. Sometimes the SI sessions happen here in the library. Sometimes they happen in classrooms. Sometimes they happen in the math department. And so because of that, barring giving our SI leaders iPods with scanners on them or always relying on a computer where people are signing in. We just felt like the paper would be a little bit simpler to cut back on some of those technological and geographical issues.
Okay, so what about tracking if a tutor provides one-on-one tutoring? Do they have a separate form that they fill out?
No, it's very similar. Well, prior to this semester, it had been a very similar form. Now it's actually going to be the exact same form. So kind of going to what I said about trying to streamline documents. We have...
Do you have a copy of it?
Yeah, I was thinking we might somewhere. So it's not this exact one, but it's very similar. So whereas this is one of our older ones, this is the study group sign-in. Now we just have a single sign-in sheet that looks very similar to this.
So it's in columns, and they just fill out that. And is the instructor always notified when the students are getting either group tutoring or?
No. I know that was a policy a while back,
Yeah.
but as far as I know, we haven't done that since I've been here at least. We do notify them when we set it up, but beyond that we don't. We do keep records of all of this in our database that you help set up.
Yeah.
So anybody could certainly see it if they were interested in those things.
But right now they don't. Okay.
Yeah, each session they're not notified.
I'm just trying to find out the process.
Yeah. No, exactly.
That's all.
Yeah.
What if, another thing that I want to know is, what if a tutor, what are the processes for someone becoming a tutor?
Becoming a tutor. On our website, and this is just the Front Range website, if you go to About Front Range, there's a job section. And underneath one of the jobs categories, it's the professional and technical hourly position. There's a job listed in there for tutoring with the Academic Success Center. And we're trying to move away from the word tutor, but it's hard to move away from it because that's kind of like the embedded lingo. But regardless, that's the job that's posted there as a tutor. It's really brief. It just kind of has a brief description of what the job entails, some of the qualifications, some of the qualities we'd be looking for. And so somebody would fill out that application. It would get kicked to us saying someone applied for the position. And then typically we have a bit of an interview with that person. It's...
If you have a need, or?
If we have a need, yeah, that's where I was just about to go. It's kind of an ongoing application pool. So we have, a list of people that have applied for it. And if we suddenly have a need for something, we might contact someone on that list and ask them, hey, we have, a need has arisen for this. Are you still interested in the position? And would you be willing to come in? And so we'll conduct an interview, and assuming everything, checks out, then we'll go ahead and process that person through to begin the hiring. There's like a background check involved and all the kind of usual HR steps associated with getting a position, even if it is just part-time. And then we're trying to ramp up our onboarding, training, development process for our tutors, but as it stands right now, a tutor will come in, we'll have about an hour onboarding, just kind of one-on-one with them, just to make sure a lot of the basic nuts and bolts are covered, such as payroll and paperwork and submitting hours, but then also going into the philosophies of the study group model and how it came to be, and a little bit of history, and then going over FERPA and Title IX and just some of those legal pieces. And then oftentimes we'll do a bit of a walk around just to make sure they're familiar with the space, they know where everything is, and that typically, like I said, takes 45 minutes to an hour. We would really like to expand that though, maybe get into certification ideas or much more theoretical, delving more into the practice and the strategies and just tips for being successful, and that's certainly something we're going to be working on moving forward.
Cool. That's very, very exciting. Okay, and then I was going to ask you, So, so submitting payroll, what is the process for that?
Yeah, so we did a survey with our tutors and our team members this past semester, and there were a number of Likert scale questions, rate 1 to 5, X, Y, and Z, and the only question that got any answers less than a 4 was about payroll. So it's not a simple process. As it stands, and I suppose the caveat to add with payroll is that payroll's always kind of tricky, right? There's always a certain level of accountability that an organization needs to be able to verify things are happening, and so that's certainly part of it. The other part is different funding sources and different pay rates. So it's not as if a single tutor is paid $20 an hour for all the work that they do. If they are doing a group tutoring session, that's a different pay rate than if they're doing a tutoring session. And if they're doing a group tutoring session, but it's grant funded, that's a different fund source than just the regular group. So some people will have 6 or 7 payroll lines on their website that are just confusing. And so putting all that together, when payroll happens, every 2 weeks, people come by, they turn in all their forms. That's basically what happens on a regular basis. They turn in all their one-on-one forms, all their study group forms, anything of that nature, all the sign-in sheets. SI leaders are pretty similar. They just have slightly different paperwork. And so they'll turn in all those things, and at the same time, they will have submitted their electronic timesheets through eWolf. And so, as I said, that could be one person having just a one-on-one timesheet and then a study group timesheet. It could be someone having 6 or 7, just depending on if they're Perkins funded or if they're supplemental instruction or if they're regular tutor. So that process can be a little convoluted, just trying to make sure that you're putting the hours into the right space. And then even then, the system's kind of clunky as it stands. It's not incredibly intuitive, which is okay. It's just part of it. A lot of people have issues with it at first, but oftentimes it just clarifies as time goes on. And then just to complete the process, so they give us the paperwork, they submit everything electronically. The approving supervisor, which will either be myself or Allison, basically compare what was submitted with the paperwork that we have. If it all checks out, then we approve it. If there's discrepancies, then we address those however they need to be addressed.
Okay. And one thing that I forgot to ask you is, when a student comes in and wants a tutor, or a group wants a tutor, and you want to figure one out, what process do you go through to determine which tutor to assign?